Ed has done a really good job for us. He has a chance to, I think, really open some eyes around the league. There's a chance he could go to another level in this. This would be the ideal year for that to happen.
Defensive Coordinator Leslie Frazier called his shot last summer, and Ed Oliver delivered. Oliver enjoyed his best season as a pro. He's always had elite athletic traits to be a good player at the NFL level, but in order to unlock his true potential, Oliver needed to attack the game from the shoulders up.
One of the things we really challenged him to be able to do is to consistently, make those big plays for us up front, using his ability to get off of blocks, chase the ball down like he does, and just to be consistently good at doing that.
And in 2021, we saw glimpses of that growth and maturation. Bills fans saw Oliver consistently defeat run blocks with his raw strength. They saw him affect quarterbacks by winning with quickness and speed. Oliver consistently transitioned from speed to power, which put him at the quarterback's doorstep more than prior seasons. 2021 was Oliver's breakout season, and that's because
He's become a student of the game.
And in today's video, we are going to show you how. Playing defensive tackle on rundowns in the NFL is a tough job, especially when discussing the Bills' defensive scheme. So much of what defensive linemen do is unheralded and unselfish, but also tied to the linebackers. At times, defensive tackles are asked to take on combination blocks and double teams to keep linebackers clean, which is a difficult assignment given the fact that Oliver is a shade under 6'2", tips the scale at 287 pounds, and has arms shorter than 32 inches. If he doesn't hold down the double team, the linebacker won't be able to make the tackle. If the linebacker doesn't come downhill and insert into his gap, the double team could eat up Oliver and not allow him to make a play. This symbiotic relationship is the catalyst for the Bills' entire front seven against the run. If Oliver is half a click late to recognize a double team coming and isn't able to anchor, he can be blown off the line of scrimmage and into the linebacker's lap. He's consistently improved in this area, and it's something the team challenged him to last offseason.
We wanted him to get to the point where he was becoming more of a thinking man's player and being able to anticipate things by personnel on the field, by down and distance, looking at a guy's stance and getting out, having an idea of what may be happening before the play actually begins.
On this play, you can visually see the tackle looking at his assignment. And as soon as Oliver spots that, he communicates it to Hughes. It tips the defense that a gap run may be called. On the snap, the deuce block unfolds, which is a double team block between a tackle and guard on a power run. Those two offensive linemen are asked to create vertical displacement, and then one of them will scoop to the second level to pick up Edmonds. But Oliver attacks the gap and overwhelms the Panthers lineman, which keeps Edmonds clean. Just tremendous work pre and post snap by Oliver. He put his talent and mental processing to use on this play. On this play, Oliver is reading the footwork of the center and guard along with the flow of the play. On the snap, Oliver sees the center zone block away from him, so his eyes immediately get on the guard. He plays with his eyes over his hands, disengages from the block, and forces the cutback to his teammate A.J. Klein. This is the type of play that doesn't get tallied in the box score. Whether at nose tackle or 3 technique, Oliver played with force at the point of attack. He was routinely the lowest man, always leading with good hand placement and pop in his hands, and with the ability to play through linemen in order to shut down outside running lanes. Oliver kept a lot of runs between the tackles, thanks to his technique and ability to read blocks and running back tracks. On this play, the Steelers are running an outside zone run to the weak side. With the Bills blitzing to the strength of the formation, Oliver is responsible for the B gap. Oliver shoots upfield, blows up the guard, which forces Najee Harris to cut it back, and when he does, Oliver wraps him up. Oliver essentially did his and Taron Johnson's job on the play. You can't block this guy one-on-one if you plan to run at him. He is just too disruptive. Here he uses his strength to send Joe Thuney back a couple yards. This cuts off the track of the running back, which then tells him to cut it back, and that's when the pursuit by Gregory Rousseau shuts the play down. Oliver makes sure that linemen feel his power on contact. Just look at how the lineman's pads elevate and his feet stop. This allows Oliver to work into his gap and scrape down the line of scrimmage to contain zone runs time and time again. Oliver became such a force on runs at him that he essentially shortened the defensive edge. No longer were ends in charge of setting the edge and forcing cutbacks. Ed Oliver's improved recognition, paired with his God-given talent, allowed him to set the edge. Oliver is generally the 3 technique defensive tackle, aligned to the strength of the formation, so to the tight end side. So when teams ran away from him, Oliver consistently blew up runs. Here's a play from week 3, one in which Oliver got bumped out of his gap, but still made the play several yards down the field. Now let's dive into some similar plays from Oliver as the season progressed. Against the Texans, you see Oliver fire off the ball. The guard tries bouncing him over to the backside tackle, but Oliver doesn't lose leverage. He seals his gap with a rip and then makes a play on the running back. This was the game that Oliver told me that things started to click for him. Later in the game, the Texans run a counter tray run away from Oliver. This means that the center has to execute a back block on the defensive tackle, which is nearly impossible given the distance that the center must cover. This was one of Oliver's 34 stops on the season, which was ranked 4th on the team. This might be one of my favorite plays from Oliver in 2021. Oliver fires into his gap and is unaffected by the backside hand of the guard. As a last-ditch effort, the tackle attempts to hook Oliver and run, hoping to get him to overrun the ball. Oliver uses his left hand to slingshot himself to the ball in order to make a tackle for loss. Using his hands to seal leverage that he won with his quickness was something that I believe Oliver needed to improve on over the years, and it's quite clear that we are seeing a massive improvement in this area. Check out his play speed here. Prior to the snap, you see him analyzing his keys. On the snap, he quickly, and I mean quickly, inserts into his gap, while simultaneously swatting down the backside hand of the guard and ripping with his outside arm. This seals and maintains the leverage he won. As the ball carrier cuts it back, Oliver disengages and changes direction to trip up the running back. Truly a complete play from the Houston native. Teams realized that Oliver was too quick and powerful for guards and tackles to execute these cutoff blocks. The backside punch of a guard wasn't helping, so teams resorted to cutting Oliver. But even if they got a piece of Oliver to slow him down, his reactive athleticism and closing speed still got him back into the play. Now, as we wrap up the film on Oliver's 5th ranked run stop percentage season against the run, I would say the one area that he needs to improve on is recognizing trap and wham blocks from opponents. Offenses want to use his aggressiveness and ability to penetrate the line of scrimmage against him by luring him upfield and utilizing wham blocks from tight ends and trap blocks by offensive linemen.
And it's a really tough read for that defensive tackle here because you are not thinking, when you see a guy pull away from you, you're thinking that Nelson is going to run some type of trap power scheme going the other way. Generally, it's with the running back offset left, it's a play going back across the formation to the right. Here, it's a total tendency breaker, and he cuts it back off of Doyle. And, we talked about how do you stop these types of plays? Well, it's play recognition, and then you got to defeat blocks.
And more times than not, Oliver was slow to recognize or sense the trap or wham blocks. He would often rush too far upfield to make a play on the back and miss, or was easily walled off by linemen short pulling. So how can Oliver improve his recognition on these sort of concepts? By picking up on pre-snap alignments by tight ends and post-snap movement by linemen like Erik Wood describes here.
You got to be on your keys because you got to know going into a game, okay, if a guy is pulling away, okay, Jack Doyle's hipped off the tackle. If he's in the line of scrimmage, there's no chance of a wham here. If he's hipped off, now you have the element where you could have some type of wham play.
And that's exactly what happens here. Oliver recognized the possibility of a wham block by Doyle based on his alignment. So on the snap, Oliver saw the block coming and defeated the block, just like Erik said he needed to. Ed Oliver finished in the top 10 in ESPN's run stop and pass rush win rate statistics, which is pretty incredible considering he was doubled nearly 60% of the snaps. According to Pro Football Focus, the rising star finished 8th in pass rush productivity by racking up 6 sacks, 12 QB hits, and 30 QB hurries. He was the Bills' most consistent player along the defensive line, especially when discussing pass rushing.
Ed, didn't have. He had 3 or 4 sacks that were probably taken away from him, on penalties, things like that. I thought he was our best, most consistent D lineman all year from start to finish. Ed really helped the back end with his disruption, having the quarterback get the ball out, or at least getting him off the spot, having to throw on the move turns into an incompletion or an interception.
What's scary is that I think we may see him make a jump next year as a pass rusher. He still uses his quickness and acceleration to challenge the lateral agility of offensive linemen. We see glimpses of him understanding how to use his hands to win as a rusher. But that is still an area I could see him making a huge stride in. especially as he continues to understand pass protection calls and assignments. Oliver will acquire a better understanding of where the weakness in the protection will be, and then formulate a plan specifically on how to beat the man in front of him. But even with that said, Oliver's improvement put him on the doorstep of QBs more often. Aside from sacks, a stat that I look at when it comes to rushers are QB hits. Oliver was third in QB hits with 12, which was up from 4 in 2020. So he showed that he is getting closer and closer to the QB, and that the sacks will come.
The game slowed down for Ed this year, and he was a huge factor in our success. And
as I said, he was top 10 in pass rush win rate on a defense that was ranked 6th in pass rush win rate. As the season progressed, you could see him putting together pass rush plans or countering linemen and attacking the weaknesses in protection. Watch how he processes how the linemen are picking up the blitz by the Bills while locking in a rip move, but then transitioning to the spin because he sees Tua stepping up into the pocket. How about this speed move by Oliver? Prior to the snap, linebacker A.J. Klein mugs the A-gap, so the center has to initially account for him. As Klein drops out, the center is late to Ed Oliver's party. Oliver penetrates upfield, which causes the guard to overset, and that's when Oliver hits Elijah Vera Tucker with an inside spin move. The center is unable to help in time, and Oliver is able to register another QB hit. His comfort in what was being asked of him, paired with the game slowing down, gave him confidence and allowed him to play fast. He wasn't just relying on his athleticism to create disruption. He was relying on his plan and hand usage. And much like his feet, his hands are rarely stagnant. They have a motor of their own. On the snap, he peeks into the A-gap and notices the center about to slide to him, so he settles into attacking out wide. As he attacks the B-gap, the lineman punches out, so Oliver attempts to chop his outside hand down, and now the lineman has him in the paint and is boxing him out. But Oliver keeps his feet moving out wide. He then lands a long arm and arm lift to create the space he needs to create a short edge for himself. He locks in a leverage with a rip move and pounces on the quarterback for the sack. Oliver saw his fair share of double teams because offensive coordinators game plan to have protection slide into his side, so interior offensive linemen could focus on their outside gap and not have to worry about getting beaten inside, because usually the center would be there to help. And that's why I loved what the Bills did on third downs. They dictated. They showed exotic, overload type looks, forcing the line to slide to their alignment, but then had stunts and games to get Oliver one-on-one, usually with the pivot guy on said slide protections. But it's something you can only do on obvious passing downs, because a defensive structure can be gashed against the run. Whether they are only rushing 4 or bring in an extra rusher, the Bills need to augment these pressure packages to get Oliver one-on-one, because if they do, he is going to continue to win and help the defense. Look at how he attacks the opposite A-gap. Throws a chop because he anticipates the center punching out as he crosses his face, but then uses his low center of gravity, leverage, and hands to clear the lineman and leave himself a clean line to the quarterback. Moving Oliver all along the defensive line is that next step in his development and in this scheme. The improvement in his mental processing has caused the game to slow down, but there's still room to improve in that area. But he's shown he is trending up. By moving him around and using him on stunts and games, the staff can stress opposing pass protections. This will force them to find Oliver on every play and then come up with a plan to pick him up. It's exactly what the Rams do with Aaron Donald and the Steelers with TJ Watt. There's a lot of talk about how the Bills need to sign or draft more defensive linemen, and to some degree that's true. Fans want QB sacks, and I get it, but the Bills can convert more of those pressures into sacks by maximizing one of the playmakers they have along their defensive line in Ed Oliver. He's become a student of the game and now has the opportunity to lead by example and to become the game wrecker that everyone thought he would be coming out of college.